Okay, 3.6. What were some problems getting the new Constitution ratified? Today we're moving into the battle to adopt the new Constitution. They were able to work out a series of compromises to get the thing out and going. The system of checks and balances in place, so now how do we get this thing going? So what are the problems with getting it ratified? Focus questions. Identify the main divisions between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. We'll get into those. Describe one argument against the ratification of the new Constitution. Evaluate, is it right or wrong, or is it good or bad, whether the compromise was able to address the arguments against the Constitution. Let's dive right in. Okay. The Constitution of the United States is a document which creates a federal government, a central government of the United States where there was none before. The states were an association of basically independent countries that came together. Those countries are giving up power and some sovereignty to join into a national government. So the result is going to be a federalist system where there is a balance of power between the national government and the state governments, with the national government being supreme. So this federalist system, basically the national government is going to have the supreme power. They're going to be able to levy, which means to collect or enact taxes and tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on trade. So the federal government is going to be the main, is going to have the main power of taxation, especially the taxation of foreign affairs. They are going to be able to regulate trade. And this is going to be critically important because the federal government regulates both trade with foreign countries and trade within this country. So, interstate commerce, interstate between different states of the Union. Let me give you an example. Let's say you decide to make some money. So a friend of yours says, hey, I got this stuff. Can you put it in this car and drive it over to New Jersey for me? Okay, so we're not being that smart this day, and we decide, okay, let's do it. So you get in that car and you drive over the George Washington Bridge and take this stuff to New Jersey. Now, on the George Washington Bridge, you get pulled over, the cops inspect your car, and they find that stuff you should not have. You are doing an illegal activity between two states. Because of that, the jurisdiction is a federal jurisdiction instead of a state jurisdiction. That becomes a federal crime. Interstate trafficking. Okay? The federal government has the power to regulate interstate commerce. To coin money. Federal government is the only government in the United States that can make money. Okay? So that's why all of our money looks the same, and that's why it's used everywhere within the country. They did away with that under the Articles of Confederation, that each state could make their own money. They didn't think that was a good idea, and that was leading to a lot of problems between states in terms of their commerce. Maintain an armed force. States can no longer have their own militaries. Now only the federal government can have a military, and the different states contribute to that military. Only the federal government can declare war. They're removing the chances for conflicts between the different states. Get this? Only the federal government can establish a post office, and the federal government establishes national courts. There's also other powers that the states do have, but there are going to be some powers that only states have and the federal government does not have. Okay, the state government also has power to tax citizens. States control public education. That's why we take a New York State Regents exam and we do not take a national exam. States have the right to punish criminals, except in interstate commerce cases, which we talked about. They have the right to protect public health and safety. That's why your police force is a state force. Okay, conduct elections, that is a state business. Establish local governments. That's why we have a state government. Okay, that's why we have a government in Albany as well. That is our state government. They take care of all of this. and marriage laws. Marriage laws are done by the states. So when you get married, the marriage certificate is issued by New York State, not the United States of America. Also, with this thing with making marriage laws, that can be something very, very, very interesting. Believe it or not, until 1964, it was legal in some states to say that a black man and a white woman or vice versa could not get married, and it's going to take the Loving case to actually overturn that, and that was 1964. We're going to get to that. Concurrent powers both can maintain law and order, so that's why there's times when the National Guard can be called in or the FBI can be called in to take care of certain situations. So even though local governments have police forces, there are times where the federal government can step in. Both can tax you, okay? That's why we have state taxes and federal taxes. Both can borrow money from banks. Both can have the power of eminent domain where they can take land for private use. And both can provide for the public welfare. So there are welfare benefits that are issued by state and federal government, okay? So this is what we call a federalist system. It is where powers are split up between the states and the federal government, with the federal government being supreme, okay? So here's some questions that are coming up as they put the Constitution together. Not everybody's going to be happy with the new Constitution. Here are some questions. Will the states have some power and sovereignty? Okay, so states are giving up power to form this government. Are they going to be able to retain power? Will states still matter? Or is the only game in town going to be the federal government? What guarantees do we have that the federal government will not abuse its power? How can we make sure that the federal government is going to be on the up and up? What guarantees are there for the rights of the individual? We got to remember, we've been fighting against a tyrannical government that has been impeding our natural rights. What guarantees do we have that we're not giving up too much power to a national government that will terrorize our freedoms and our rights and take that away from us? So the federal system is the answer. The federal government, as the central government, has the majority of the power. However, states do maintain some power and some sovereignty. All right, now, there's advantages for this. By joining together and forming a large central government, therefore they're coming together and forming a more powerful union. Okay, think back to the Albany Plan of Union and the snake that was separated. Together, we are strong. Apart, we are weak. So by joining together, it allows the country to be stronger. It allows the country to be better. Okay, and this is going to be an advantage. However, there's going to be fears of the power. So there's delegated and reserved powers. We talked about that. Delegated powers are powers that are assigned to the federal government. Reserved powers are powers that are reserved for the state governments. Concurrent is a word that means both or together. So concurrent powers are powers that are held by both federal and state government. Now, they get this together, and then there's a ratification battle. So once we got the Constitution created, it's written, it has to be ratified. To be ratified means to be approved by at least 9 of 13 states in order for the Constitution to be adopted to replace the Articles of Confederation. Now, there's some people that aren't going to be happy with this thing. The biggest concern is they think the new government that's going to be created, this national government, is going to be too powerful, and that we're trading away the protections that we had fought for, and now we're adopting a new tyrannical overlord in our own country. So the biggest concern that the biggest concern is that new federal government is created. Okay, now there's going to be two groups that are basically going to come together at the after the Constitution. There are going to be what are called Federalists, and there are going to be Anti-Federalists. Federalists are going to be people that are going to be in the support of a strong central government. Anti-Federalists are going to be people that are going to be afraid of a strong central government, and they want to make sure that states have more power and that there's more protection for individuals. These are going to be the forerunners of political parties that are going to emerge shortly thereafter. The leaders of the Federalists are going to be Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. The leader of the Anti-Federalist is going to be Thomas Jefferson. Okay, these names you're going to need to know as they're going to keep coming up. Hamilton is not going to be a president, but Hamilton's going to have enormous power in the early Republican period. Jefferson and Madison both will become presidents. Let's talk about the ratification battle. So, Constitution is created. We got two groups. Some groups are in favor of the Constitution because of the strong central government. Some groups are against it because of the strong central government, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So there's going to be a fight to try to get those 9 states to approve the Constitution. The Federalists are going to really fight hard because they want this Constitution ratified. They want that strong central government. They think that is going to be absolutely necessary. So in order to do this, they start writing arguments in support of the government, in support of the Constitution. And these articles are known as Federalist Papers. They were anonymously written and published under the name Publius, which means the public, in newspapers around the country, and they were pleas and arguments for the creation of a strong central government. And these Federalist Papers are going to be instrumental in understanding the intent of the Constitution. They're still studied today. Okay? The Federalist Papers are going to argue that the federal government will protect the rights of minorities. And by minorities, we do not mean minorities like black and brown and Hispanic people like we talk about today. By minorities, we mean people who do not have a majority of the vote. So, basically, we're creating a democracy. It's the first time a democracy has ever been created, and a democracy is a rule by the people. So as long as the majority of the people rule and they get their way. Well, the question is, well, if the majority of the people say, we want to kill Roberto, can the government kill Roberto just like that? Well, they are arguing with the Federalist Papers that the Constitution of the United States is going to guarantee the rights of the people that are in the minority. So that means that there will not be a tyranny of the majority, and that just because you have the most votes does not mean that you can do whatever you want. That's where the system of checks and balances come in to preserve the rights of the power. Also, they're going to protect against the abuse of power through a system of checks and balances. So that checks and balances is there to make sure government doesn't abuse its power and to protect the rights of the minority. We're going to get more into that in class. The Anti-Federalists, however, are not convinced. The Anti-Federalists say, okay, fine, there's protections for the institutions of power. The checks and balances are going to make sure the president himself does not become too powerful. But what guarantees are there in this Constitution that the government of the United States will not abuse an individual citizen? If we want to go out there and we want to kill Destiny, what guarantees that we can't go out and kill Destiny? Well, that's what the Anti-Federalists are arguing. The Anti-Federalists say we need to have some protection for individual rights. So they are lobbying for the creation of a Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights is a guarantee of rights for the people that the federal government cannot infringe upon. And the Anti-Federalists are steadfast. They say they will not support the Constitution of the United States without a Bill of Rights. So, one thing that the Constitution does have, and this is the true beauty of the Constitution, is it has in it the ability to amend itself or change. So that means that we can amend the Constitution of the United States. We can put changes in there, and we can adapt it to the changing needs of the country. So, what they compromise in doing is they put a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, and that becomes the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The First Amendment is absolutely fundamental. Freedom of speech. One interruption, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. All of that is the First Amendment. The rest of the amendments deal with other freedoms that we're going to go more in depth in class. Absolutely 100% fundamental to the creation of this country is that Bill of Rights. And the anti-federalists fight hard to make sure that Bill of Rights is included. And then comes the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment is different. The 10th Amendment states that any power not granted to the federal government by the Constitution of the United States is reserved and protected for the states. Basically, it's an ensurement that the Constitution is not a blank check of power to the national government, and that the states and that the people themselves are guaranteed rights. That is the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, and that goes along for ratification with the Constitution. With that together, the states are the anti-federalists are going to be able to basically be placated so that there can be a ratification of this Constitution. Okay, so the Constitution is going to be ratified by the states between 1787 and 1790. For many states, they would only ratify the Constitution by also adopting the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was also included, and they were included in the Constitution in 1789. So the Constitution of the United States is going to be adopted by the government in 1789. Okay, let's go back to our focus question. Identify the main reasons for the divisions between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Describe one argument against the ratification of the new Constitution, and evaluate whether the compromise was able to address the arguments against the Constitution. There you go. There's your assignment. We will talk more about it in class. Good luck, and email if you have any questions.